A racist man rejected her love, calling her unworthy because of her skin. Years later, this black woman rose to billionaire status, shattering his pride. Their unexpected reunion revealed a shocking twist you won't believe. The warm golden hues of a late summer evening bathed the small town in soft light. But for Mia Thompson, it was anything but beautiful. She stood nervously at the edge of her favorite park, hands trembling, clutching a small, handwritten note. The words she had poured onto the page felt heavy now. It was a confession of love she had carried in her heart for years. Across the park, David Mason approached, his sharp features softened by the dimming sunlight. David was the heir to one of the wealthiest families in town, a fact he carried with an air of entitlement. As he drew closer, Mia felt her heart race, not with excitement, but with a growing dread she couldn't shake. When David finally reached her, his icy blue eyes met her warm brown ones. For a moment, the world seemed to still. Mia swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "David, I care about you. I've always cared." She extended the note, her hand shaking. David took it, glancing down at her words for a fleeting moment, before a sharp, mocking laugh escaped his lips. "Mia, are you serious?" he sneered, crumpling the note in his hand. "You actually thought someone like me could ever be with someone like you?" Mia's face burned with humiliation as his words cut deeper than she thought possible. "David, I thought," she trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "Thought what?" he interrupted, stepping closer, his tone dripping with disdain. "That I'd fall for a girl like you? Look at yourself, Mia. You don't belong in my world. You never will." Tears stung Mia's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "What does that even mean?" she asked, her voice cracking. David looked her up and down, his lips curling into a cruel smirk. "It means you're not good enough, Mia. Not for me, not for my family, and definitely not for the life I'm destined for. You're just some black girl in a small town who dreams too big." His words hung in the air, each one a dagger to her heart. For a moment, Mia stood frozen, every ounce of her confidence shattered. Then, as the tears finally spilled over, she turned and walked away, her back to the man who had crushed her spirit. As she reached the edge of the park, she glanced back, half hoping he might call out, apologize, or even show a shred of remorse. But David had already turned away, laughing with his friends who had been watching from a distance. That night, Mia lay awake in her small bedroom, the sound of her mother washing dishes in the kitchen filling the silence. She clutched her journal tightly, her tears smudging the ink of her dreams. For years, she had envisioned a future where love and ambition could coexist. But David's rejection made her question everything. Yet, deep within her, something began to shift. The pain of his words ignited a fire she didn't know she had. "I'll show him," Mia whispered to herself, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'll show them all." The rejection wasn't the end of Mia's story. It was only the beginning. Mia woke the next morning with puffy eyes and a heavy heart, but also with a newfound determination she had never felt before. The pain of David's rejection simmered beneath the surface, not as a weakness, but as a spark. She pulled out her journal, flipping through pages filled with ideas, sketches, and half-formed plans she had been too scared to act on. "This is where it starts," she whispered to herself, gripping the journal tightly. Mia had always been good with numbers, a natural problem solver with an eye for detail. Growing up, she had spent hours helping her mother balance the family's meager finances and watching her father, a skilled carpenter, run his small but struggling workshop. Those early lessons in resilience stayed with her. She enrolled in a nearby community college, juggling part-time jobs to pay her way through school. While others partied or relaxed after classes, Mia spent her nights poring over textbooks and teaching herself everything she could about business, finance, and entrepreneurship. Her professors took notice of her relentless work ethic, often pulling her aside to encourage her. "Have you thought about starting your own business?" one professor asked after class one day, holding up a project she had aced. Mia hesitated but nodded. "I have ideas," she said quietly. "But people like me don't usually get those chances." The professor leaned forward, a kind smile on her face. "People like you? Mia, people like you are the ones who change the world. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words stayed with Mia, fueling her during the long, grueling days. Slowly but surely, she began to form a vision. By the time she graduated, Mia had saved enough to start her first venture, a small consulting firm specializing in helping local businesses improve their financial health. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. She worked tirelessly, knocking on doors, pitching her services to small business owners, and taking on any client who gave her a chance. At first, the setbacks were endless. People doubted her, laughed at her ideas, or simply refused to take her seriously. But Mia didn't give up. Every rejection was a reminder of David's words, and every small victory was a step toward proving him, and everyone else who doubted her, wrong. One day, as she sat in her tiny office, her phone buzzed with an email from a mid-sized manufacturing company. The owner had heard about her reputation for turning struggling businesses around and wanted her help. Mia's heart raced as she read the email. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The next few months were a whirlwind. Mia threw herself into the project, analyzing the company's operations, streamlining costs, and creating strategies to boost profits. When the company turned a profit for the first time in years, word spread quickly. Suddenly, Mia wasn't just the young black woman running a small consulting firm. She was a name people trusted. Her success snowballed from there. Mia expanded her business, hired a small team, and began landing bigger and more prestigious clients. Within a few years, she had built a multi-million-dollar consulting empire. But Mia wasn't content to stop there. She started investing in tech startups, many founded by women and minorities who, like her, had been overlooked and underestimated. Her portfolio grew, and with it, her influence. The media began taking notice, calling her the rising star of entrepreneurship. Interviews and magazine covers followed, but Mia stayed grounded, focusing on her mission. Years later, as she stood on the stage of a packed auditorium, receiving an award for her contributions to business and philanthropy, she took a deep breath and looked out at the audience. In that sea of faces, she could see her mother, tears streaming down her face, and her father, clapping proudly. "I didn't get here alone," Mia began, her voice steady. "There were many who doubted me, some who dismissed me because of who I am or where I come from. But to those who believed in me, and to those who didn't, thank you. You made me stronger." As the crowd erupted into applause, Mia felt a sense of fulfillment she couldn't put into words. But deep inside, she knew her journey wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself that she was always worthy. What Mia didn't know was that someone from her past had been following her rise, watching in silence as the girl he had once dismissed became a woman the world couldn't ignore. The story wasn't over yet. It was a crisp autumn morning when Mia returned to her hometown for the first time in years. The place that had once felt so small and suffocating now seemed distant, almost foreign. The streets were lined with the same old shops, but Mia was no longer the same girl who had walked them with hesitant steps and uncertain dreams. She was back to deliver a keynote speech at a local entrepreneurship summit, organized by the very community that had doubted her. As her car pulled up to the small, newly renovated event center, she noticed the banner with her name emblazoned across it. Mia Thompson, entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist. Mia felt a pang of nostalgia as she stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement. This was where it had all started, where she had faced heartbreak and rejection, and where she had first decided to fight for the life she wanted. Inside, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Young entrepreneurs, local business owners, and even reporters had gathered to hear Mia speak. As she walked toward the stage, shaking hands and exchanging polite smiles, she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd, David Mason. He was older now, his once pristine confidence dulled. His expensive suit couldn't hide the slump of his shoulders or the faint bitterness in his eyes. Mia froze for a moment, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't thought of him in years, but seeing him here brought a flood of memories rushing back. The cruel laughter, the sharp words, the humiliation. David seemed just as stunned to see her. Their eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the program in his lap. The event unfolded seamlessly. Mia shared her journey, her voice calm but powerful, as she recounted the struggles and triumphs that had shaped her. The audience hung on her every word. Some moved to tears, others inspired to follow in her footsteps. As the applause thundered and Mia stepped off the stage, she was approached by dozens of attendees eager to meet her. Amid the flurry of handshakes and congratulations, David lingered in the background, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite place. Finally, as the crowd began to thin, David mustered the courage to approach. "Mia," he said hesitantly, his voice a shadow of the arrogance it once held. Mia turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "David," she said, her tone polite but distant. He shifted awkwardly, the confidence he had once wielded so easily, now replaced with uncertainty. I didn't expect to see you here," he said, forcing a smile. "You've done well for yourself." Mia raised an eyebrow, her gaze steady. "Yes, I have," she replied simply. David hesitated, the words seeming to catch in his throat. "Listen, Mia, about back then." "I don't," Mia interrupted, her voice firm but calm. "You don't need to explain. I've moved on." Her words were kind, but they carried a weight that made David flinch. He glanced around, as if searching for an escape, but he forced himself to continue. I wanted to say I was wrong. About everything. I was young and stupid, and I didn't see what was right in front of me. You deserved better." Mia studied him for a moment, her emotions a mix of pity, triumph, and closure. "You're right," she said softly. "I did." David's face fell, and for the first time Mia saw him as something other than the cruel boy who had once broken her heart. He looked lost, as though the weight of his regrets had finally caught up to him. Mia smiled faintly and extended her hand. "I hope you find what you're looking for, David." He stared at her hand for a moment before shaking it, his grip tentative. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. As he walked away, Mia felt a sense of release, as though a chapter of her life had finally closed. She watched him disappear into the crowd, his figure blending into the sea of faces. In that moment, Mia realized the truth. She hadn't come back to prove anything to anyone, not even to David. Her success was her own, and it had never been about seeking validation. For the first time, she felt truly free. The story, however, wasn't over. Life had a way of weaving unexpected threads, and Mia's journey was just beginning. A few weeks after the event, Mia returned to her sleek, modern office in the heart of the city. Her days were filled with meetings, investment decisions, and philanthropic ventures. Yet, despite the whirlwind of her life, her encounter with David lingered in her mind, not as a source of pain, but as a curious reminder of how far she'd come. One crisp afternoon, Mia's assistant knocked gently on her office door. "Ms. Thompson, there's a visitor here to see you," she said cautiously. Mia looked up, mildly curious. "Do they have an appointment?" "No," her assistant replied hesitantly, "but he said it's important." "It's David Mason." Mia froze for a moment, her pen hovering above the documents she had been signing. She hadn't expected to see David again, especially not in her office. "Send him in," she said, her voice calm but curious. David entered, his demeanor subdued and almost nervous. He was a far cry from the confident, entitled man she had once known. Dressed in a simple suit that seemed too formal for the occasion, he clutched a worn leather folder in his hands. "Mia," he began, his voice hesitant as he took a seat across from her. "Thank you for seeing me." Mia leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. "What brings you here, David?" she asked, her tone neutral but firm. He hesitated, glancing down at the folder before meeting her gaze. "I know this is unexpected," he began, "but I've hit a rough patch. My family's company is struggling. We're on the brink of bankruptcy, and I don't know what else to do. Mia raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. And you think I can help? David nodded slowly, his hands gripping the folder tightly. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, not after the way I treated you. But you're the only person I can turn to. Your success, your expertise, you've built something incredible. If anyone can save the company, it's you. Mia's mind raced as she processed his words. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. Here was the same man who had once dismissed her as unworthy because of her race, now sitting in her office, asking for her help. She let the silence stretch for a moment before responding. David, let me ask you something, she said, her voice steady. Why should I help you? David's face fell, and for a moment, he looked utterly defeated. Because I was wrong, he admitted, his voice trembling. I was arrogant and blind, and I hurt you in ways I can never take back. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm desperate. I'm asking you, not as the person I was, but as the person I'm trying to become. Mia's heart softened slightly, but her years of hard-earned wisdom kept her guarded. Desperation has a way of humbling people, she said calmly. But I need more than an apology, David. What are you offering? What's in this for me? David opened the folder, sliding a stack of documents across her desk. Equity, he said simply. If you help save the company, I'll give you a controlling stake. You'd have full authority to run it as you see fit. Mia glanced at the documents, her sharp business instincts kicking in. The company's financials were dire. Debts, declining revenue, outdated operations. It would be a monumental challenge, even for someone with her expertise. For a moment she thought of walking away. But then she considered the bigger picture. This wasn't just about David. If the company collapsed, hundreds of employees would lose their jobs. Families would suffer. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was an opportunity here to create something meaningful. After a long pause, Mia looked up at David. I'll think about it, she said finally, her tone measured. David exhaled deeply, relief washing over his face. Thank you, Mia, he said, standing to leave. Thank you. As he walked out of her office, Mia leaned back in her chair, staring at the folder on her desk. She didn't owe David anything, but this wasn't about him anymore. It was about her values, and what she could do with the opportunity now in her hands. The decision she was about to make would change everything, for both of them. Mia spent the next few days meticulously reviewing the documents David had left behind. The company's financial health was worse than she initially thought. Its debts were staggering, and its leadership had been neglectful for years. But buried beneath the chaos, Mia saw potential. A chance to not only turn the company around, but to reshape its future in her image. When Mia finally called David to her office, her decision was made. As he entered, his nervous energy was palpable. He sat across from her, his hands folded tightly. I'll take your offer, Mia said, her tone calm but commanding. But there are conditions. David straightened, a flicker of hope crossing his face. Anything, he said quickly. Mia leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. First, I want full operational control of the company. No interference, no second guessing. Second, I want the culture of this company to change. No more nepotism, no more exclusion. The toxic foundation that got it into this mess ends now. David nodded, his face pale but determined. Agreed. And finally, Mia added, her voice hardening, I want your word that you'll stay out of my way. This isn't just about saving a company, David. This is about proving that businesses can thrive when they reflect fairness, inclusion, and hard work, not entitlement and prejudice. Are we clear? David hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Crystal clear, he said, his voice quiet. Over the next several months, Mia stepped into her new role with the same determination that had propelled her from rejection to success. She replaced inefficient executives with a diverse team of talented professionals who shared her vision for a fair and progressive workplace. She renegotiated contracts, modernized operations, and rebranded the company's tarnished image. Under her leadership, The company not only stabilized, but began to thrive. Profits soared, and its reputation transformed from a failing family-run business into a model of innovation and inclusivity. David watched from the sidelines, his once dominant role reduced to that of a passive shareholder. Every time he saw Mia walk into the boardroom, commanding respect and admiration, he was reminded of how wrong he had been all those years ago. One afternoon, as Mia prepared for a major press conference to announce the company's latest success, David approached her in the office hallway. "Mia," he said hesitantly, "can I have a moment?" Mia turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" "I just wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice soft, "for everything, for giving the company and me a second chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll always be grateful." Mia studied him for a moment, then offered a small nod. "You're welcome, David. But remember, this wasn't for you. It was for the people who depend on this company, the people you overlooked." David nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "You've built something incredible, Mia," he said quietly. Mia smiled faintly. "Yes, I have. And I'm just getting started." Later that day, Mia stood before a crowd of reporters, employees, and investors. Cameras flashed as she spoke about the company's transformation, her voice steady and inspiring. "This journey has been about more than just turning a business around," she said. "It's been about proving that integrity, inclusivity, and resilience are not just ideals. They're the foundation of true success." As the crowd erupted into applause, Mia glanced out at the sea of faces. Somewhere near the back she spotted David, his expression a mix of awe and regret. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Mia didn't linger. She turned her attention back to the crowd, her gaze forward and unwavering. Her journey had come full circle, but this time she was in control. The rejection that had once shattered her was now a distant memory, a stepping stone on her path to greatness. Mia had risen, not for revenge but for herself. And in doing so, she had built a legacy that no one, not even a man like David, could ever take away. Months passed, and Mia's leadership propelled the company into uncharted territory. Her name became synonymous with innovation and inclusivity, and she was celebrated as a trailblazer in business. But as Mia's influence grew, so did the challenges that came with it. One afternoon, during a routine board meeting, Mia's CFO, Karen Patel, entered the room looking troubled. She placed a stack of documents on the conference table. "Mia, we have a problem," she began, her voice tense. Mia leaned forward, her brows furrowing. "What is it?" Karen hesitated before continuing. "It's one of our overseas suppliers. They've been accused of unethical labor practices, child labor, unsafe working conditions. If these allegations are true, it could damage everything we've worked to build." The room fell silent. Mia's stomach tightened as she scanned the documents. Her company prided itself on ethical practices, and this news threatened to undermine everything she stood for. "How bad is it?" Mia asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Bad," Karen admitted. "If the media gets hold of this, the backlash could be devastating." Mia took a deep breath, her mind racing. This wasn't just about protecting her company. It was about staying true to the values she had fought so hard to uphold. That evening, Mia stayed late in her office, poring over the documents. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed with a call from her father. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Mia hesitated before replying. "There's an issue with one of our suppliers," she admitted. "It could undo a lot of the progress we've made." Her father paused. "Mia, you've faced bigger challenges than this. You didn't get here by running away from tough decisions. Do what you've always done. Lead with integrity. The rest will follow." His words steadied her, and Mia knew what she had to do. The next morning, Mia called an emergency meeting with her leadership team. "We're launching a full investigation into these allegations," she announced. "I want transparency and accountability at every level. If these claims are true, We'll sever ties with the supplier immediately, no matter the cost. Her team exchanged nervous glances. Mia, that could disrupt our supply chain, one executive cautioned. Then we'll adapt, Mia said firmly. We don't compromise on our principles. As the investigation unfolded, the media caught wind of the story. Headlines questioned whether Mia's company could survive the scandal. Competitors seized the opportunity to undermine her reputation, while investors grew anxious. Amid the chaos, David unexpectedly reached out. Mia, I heard about what's happening, he said during a phone call. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. Mia was taken aback by his sincerity. Thank you, David, she replied cautiously. But I've got it under control. David paused before adding, for what it's worth, I believe in you. You'll come through this. Weeks later, the investigation confirmed the allegations against the supplier. True to her word, Mia terminated the contract and issued a public statement. Integrity is the foundation of our company, she said during a live press conference. We take full responsibility for ensuring our practices align with our values. This is a moment to do better, and we will. The decision came at a steep cost: delays in production, lost revenue, and a temporary dip in public confidence. But as the dust settled, Mia's unwavering commitment to ethics began to rebuild trust. Customers rallied behind her, praising her transparency and courage. Months later, as Mia stood in her office overlooking the city skyline, Karen entered with a smile. We just signed a deal with a new supplier, one that meets all of our standards. The company's back on track. Mia nodded, a sense of relief washing over her. This challenge had tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated, but it had also reaffirmed what mattered most: staying true to herself. Looking out at the bustling city below, Mia knew there would always be new obstacles ahead. But with every challenge came an opportunity to lead with purpose and leave a legacy of resilience, integrity, and hope. Her journey was far from over, and she was ready for whatever came next.